What if everything you have been taught about strength is a lie? What if the very things you clutch to prove your worth are the exact chains that keep you weak? The world will tell you to be transparent, to show yourself, to spill your thoughts and your doubts like water on the ground. They call it honesty, they call it vulnerability, they call it courage. But I tell you now, it is nothing more than self-betrayal. Power does not announce itself. Power does not confess. Power conceals. The man who bears his soul invites the knife. The man who guards his silence breeds fear and respect in equal measure. Weakness thrives in exposure. Strength is born in shadows. Consider how easily society worships the spectacle of openness. They tell you to broadcast every thought on glowing screens, to confide in strangers as if loyalty is guaranteed, to believe that applause equals validation. But applause is not power. Applause is the addiction of slaves who cannot endure silence. The man who seeks constant approval is a beggar dressed in fine clothes. He is fragile because he depends on the mood of the crowd, and when the crowd turns, he will discover he owns nothing, not even himself. Understand this reversal. The things you are told will make you powerful are the very things that will strip you of power. History itself exposes this trap. Princes who revealed too much of their heart were crushed by conspirators who studied their every weakness. Leaders who trusted openly in promises were betrayed by those who saw opportunity in their naivety. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This is not cynicism, it is survival. Men judge with their eyes, not their hands. They are deceived by surfaces. Therefore, he who controls appearances controls judgment. If you show them everything, you lose the ability to shape what they see. If you let them into your depths, you give them weapons that will one day be used against you. Look around you in this modern age, where the currency of weakness is exposure. The man who posts every thought online, the man who overshares his pain to gain sympathy, the man who confesses his doubts to his rivals, these are the men who collapse when the tide turns against them. They mistake attention for loyalty, they mistake likes for armor. But attention is wind, it changes direction in an instant. Silence, however, is granite, it endures, and those who face a silent man do not sleep soundly at night, for they do not know what he thinks, they do not know what he plans, they do not know what he hides, and uncertainty is the father of fear. Do you know why lions terrify? Not merely because of their claws or their teeth, but because of their silence before the strike. The moment of stillness before the leap is more dreadful than the leap itself. The enemy who knows your plan can prepare. The enemy who guesses is already defeated. When you are unreadable, you force the world to play against shadows. You force rivals to waste their strength in anticipation. You stand untouched, while they exhaust themselves against the phantoms of your silence. That is power. The fox survives because it deceives. The lion survives because it strikes. But both survive because they are never fully seen until it is too late. And so I tell you, erase your weakness by erasing your compulsion to be known. You have been trained to believe that transparency is noble. It is not. It is servitude. A man who cannot endure being misunderstood is a man destined for chains. True power is not in explanation. True power is in the ability to remain silent while others beg to decode you. To master yourself is to master what you reveal. To master what you reveal is to master the battlefield itself. Every man who has ever risen to command has done so not by being obvious, but by being unreadable. Mark this well. The world does not reward the exposed, it consumes them. It rewards the hidden, the disciplined, the man who holds his cards so close that when he finally moves, the move is irresistible. You think you must prove yourself, but proof is for the weak. Proof is for the desperate. The strong need no proof. They create outcomes that speak louder than words. So if you would erase your weakness, begin with this. Resist the urge to explain, to confess, to reveal. Become the man who can sit in silence while others chatter. Become the man who can bear misunderstanding without correction. Become the man whose presence unsettles because no one can measure him. This is the first cut into weakness, to see that every moment you speak without necessity, every moment you display without calculation, every moment you surrender privacy for validation, you cut into your own armor, and a man without armor is already a corpse waiting to be buried. The path of power is not about gaining more, it is about discarding the illusions that leave you exposed. To erase weakness, erase the compulsion to show. And once you begin, you will discover something terrifying. Silence itself becomes a weapon, and you will wield it like a blade. You mistake weakness for connection, but weakness is only ever exploited. Look closely at the traps that surround you today. The man who reveals his every thought believes he is building trust, but in truth he is building dependence. He is teaching others how to control him, word by word, confession by confession. Every revealed insecurity becomes a string tied to his body, and soon he finds himself a puppet whose movements are dictated by those who hold the strings. This is the first trap of the weak, the addiction to validation. He seeks applause, thinking it makes him stronger, but applause is a leash, and the crowd becomes his master. The second trap is the cult of vulnerability, the idea that bearing your wounds makes you admirable. No, it makes you predictable. A rival who knows your scars knows where to cut. A competitor who knows your doubts knows how to whisper poison into your ear. A supposed friend who hears your confessions is only one shift of loyalty away from betraying you. Do not think that because you exposed yourself and received pity that you have gained allies. You have gained liabilities. People admire strength, not bleeding. They admire resilience, not collapse. Pity is not loyalty, it is preparation. Men who pity you today will abandon you tomorrow, because pity never translates into respect. And there is yet another snare, more subtle than the rest, the endless chatter of social noise. In the age of exposure, men confuse communication with influence. They believe that posting, speaking, broadcasting, and explaining grant them power. But the truth is reversed. The more they speak, the more predictable they become. The more predictable they are, the more controllable they are. Words without calculation are footprints in wet sand, easy to follow, easy to erase. The strong man does not compete in the theater of noise. He withholds, and by withholding he dominates. For while others waste themselves shouting into the void, he calculates in silence. Understand this. Transparency is not a gift you give to the world. It is a debt you pay to your weakness. It is the sign of a man who has nothing solid within him, who must beg others to confirm his worth. That is why he reveals himself compulsively, because he cannot endure the solitude of silence. Weakness always seeks company, for silence terrifies it. But you must be different. You must reverse the pattern. Where others speak, you must withhold. Where others reveal, you must conceal. Where others broadcast their movements, you must disappear into the shadows until your strike is inevitable. There is a reason Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn not to be good. Goodness, as men define it, is nothing more than weakness dressed in noble language. A man who shows his heart without restraint believes he is virtuous, but he is merely vulnerable, and the vultures circle vulnerability faster than blood in the water draws sharks. If you would erase your weakness, begin by severing the ties that expose you. Do not let your enemies see your doubts. Do not let your rivals hear your thoughts. Do not let the masses feast upon your wounds. Keep your silence intact, for in silence lies your edge. Watch how quickly the crowd turns on those who reveal too much. Today they cheer your openness. Tomorrow they mock your collapse. They loved the man who confessed his struggles, until his struggles consumed him, and then they moved on, leaving his corpse of reputation behind. Meanwhile, the silent man remains untouchable. His absence breeds speculation. His restraint breeds fear. They invent stories about him because he has given them nothing concrete, and in their endless guessing, he becomes larger than life. For men do not fear what they understand. They fear what they cannot. So you see, the first fractures in weakness are found in these modern traps: applause, pity, noise. Erase them from your life and you begin to step into power. Applause is slavery, pity is poison, noise is exposure. The man who refuses all three cannot be owned, cannot be pitied, cannot be anticipated. He becomes unreadable, and unreadability is strength. This is where the threshold lies. Once you cross it, you leave behind the fragile comforts of the weak and enter the realm of the strong. And once you enter, there is no going back. For the silence you wield will terrify others, but it will also terrify you until you master it and discover it was your truest weapon all along. Now you must see the humiliations that await the man who clings to weakness. Watch him chase applause like a starving dog begging for scraps, mistaking the hand that feeds for a gesture of love. He enters rooms not to command but to be noticed. He posts his every thought, not to influence, but to be seen. And though the crowd may cheer, they cheer for their own amusement, not his authority. He is a performer on their stage, dancing until they tire of him, and when they do, they discard him as easily as one discards a broken toy. This is not power, it is servitude dressed in celebration. Consider how oversharing strips a man of all mystique. The weak believe that telling their struggles, their pains, their secrets will make others admire their courage. But courage is not in confession, it is in endurance. A man who endlessly displays his wounds is not seen as brave, but as fragile. Every word of self-exposure etches cracks into his armor, and those cracks invite the hammer. And when the hammer falls, it is swift and merciless. He has already told the world where to strike. He has already given away the map of his destruction. What greater humiliation exists than to be ruined by weapons you forged against yourself? Do not think this is theory alone. History provides parables written in blood. Recall Oliverotto da Fermo, who invited his rivals to a feast, smiling as he poured wine into their cups. When the laughter was loudest, he gave the signal, and his men cut them down where they sat. Hospitality became execution. Trust became slaughter. The weak man believes the table is safe, but the table has always been a battlefield. The banquet of applause, the dinner of flattery, the feast of pity, these are traps. To walk into them is to offer your throat willingly to the knife. Weakness always believes the laughter is real until the steel proves otherwise. Picture this: a gladiator who enters the arena, unarmed, confident that his words will shield him. He speaks of his pain, of his fears, of his longings, as if the crowd will protect him for his honesty. But the arena does not reward honesty, it rewards blood, and so he dies with noble words on his tongue, while the silent gladiator, disciplined, unreadable, conserving his strength, strikes without warning and leaves the sand stained red. The crowd does not remember the confessor, they remember the victor. The lesson is clear: exposure does not earn admiration, victory does. Applause addiction, oversharing, desperate validation. These are trials that most men fail because they are addicted to being seen rather than feared. And so they collapse in public view, humiliated by the very stage they built. But humiliation is not merely personal, it is contagious. Once a man is seen as weak, others treat him as weak. Friends become indifferent, rivals become bold, and even strangers begin to test him. He becomes the spectacle of collapse, and collapse spreads like rot. His downfall becomes entertainment, and he is mocked as he falls. Weakness is never a private failure, it is a public execution. Understand this: to live by applause is to die by ridicule. To live by pity is to die by betrayal. To live by validation is to die by emptiness. The weak man endures trial after trial, and in each one he repeats the same mistake. He reveals, he exposes, he begs, and so he fails. But from these failures comes the possibility of growth, if he can endure humiliation long enough to see the truth. That truth is silence. That truth is concealment. That truth is to turn away from applause and toward unreadability. Only then can the man step from the trials of weakness into the path of power. And so I tell you, let the weak dance for the crowd. Let the fragile bare their souls. Let the desperate bleed for pity. Their path is humiliation, and their fate is collapse. But you must not walk with them. You must be the man who holds his silence like a weapon, the man who watches the spectacle with cold detachment, the man who studies the errors of the weak not with pity, but with strategy. For their downfall is your lesson, their exposure is your warning, their humiliation is your map. Learn from their failures, and you will never repeat them. Betrayal is the crucible where the illusions of false strength are shattered. Every man who builds his power on the unstable ground of openness will one day watch it collapse beneath him. It begins with trust given too freely. A secret whispered to a friend becomes a weapon in an enemy's hand. A confession shared in intimacy resurfaces in mockery. A weakness revealed in the hope of compassion is stored, remembered, and later exploited. The collapse does not happen with thunder. It begins in silence, like cracks forming in stone. By the time he hears the sound, the structure of his strength is already falling apart. This is the death of the weak, the betrayal of the very ties they thought made them safe. Understand this deeply. Collapse is not sudden, it is cumulative. The man who constantly explains himself, who constantly reveals himself, chips away at his own fortress. At first, the collapse is small, a lost opportunity, a reputation slightly stained, but the fractures widen. His openness is interpreted as fragility, His transparency is interpreted as incompetence. His vulnerability is interpreted as weakness. Soon the crowd that once applauded now doubts. Soon the rivals who once smiled now sharpen their knives. And in that moment of realization, when all the applause and pity he lived for turned to silence and scorn, he discovers the truth. His power was never real. It was borrowed, and it has been reclaimed. This is the death phase of weakness. But in death, there is rebirth. If one has the discipline to endure the fire without dissolving in it. For when the false strength has burned away, what remains is the opportunity to forge something indestructible. Collapse teaches the man that reliance on others is slavery. Betrayal teaches him that exposure is fatal. Humiliation teaches him that validation is poison. And if he accepts these lessons without excuses, if he lets the ashes of his old self settle, he can begin again, not with applause, not with pity, not with validation, but with silence and control. Silence is not emptiness, it is architecture. It is the unseen scaffolding upon which real power is built. When a man learns to withhold, to resist the urge to explain, to master his tongue and his expression, he ceases to be predictable. And unpredictability is the seed of fear. Consider the man who enters a room and says nothing. The talkers dominate the air, but their dominance is brittle, for each word reveals them further. The silent man, by contrast, grows larger in their minds. They project upon him suspicion, danger, superiority. They wonder what he knows, what he sees, what he intends, and while they wonder, he observes. While they expose themselves, he conceals. This is the rebirth, the transformation from open victim to silent predator. But rebirth requires ruthlessness, not against others first, but against yourself. You must crucify your compulsion to be understood. You must murder your addiction to validation. You must strangle the need for applause. This self-destruction is the price of survival, and it is not a gentle process. It feels like suffocation, because silence will at first seem unbearable. You will feel ignored. You will feel misunderstood. You will feel erased. But these feelings are illusions. The cries of the weak self dying, endure them. Do not yield. For once the noise of weakness is gone, what remains is steel. It is here, in this moment of rebirth, that you must embrace control. Control of your words, control of your expressions, control of your very presence. Do not allow a careless sentence to betray you. Do not allow a reflexive smile to weaken you. Do not allow a thoughtless confession to disarm you. Every gesture, every silence, every word withheld becomes an act of warfare. And as you master these, you will find that others begin to bend toward you without understanding why. They lean into your silence. They defer to your presence. They respect what they cannot read. This is not illusion, it is power. So remember, death is necessary. The collapse of false strength is not the end. It is the cleansing fire. Betrayal is not cruelty. It is instruction. Humiliation is not destruction, it is awakening. From these you are reborn, and in your rebirth, you discover that the silence you once feared is the weapon you always needed. The weak will continue to bleed their secrets and die by them, but you reborn in silence will walk into rooms unreadable, unbroken, untouchable, and from that silence your dominion will begin. Revelation comes when you finally understand that the greatest force in power is not what is spoken, but what is withheld. The weak man believes revelation is about confession, about pouring himself into the hands of others. But true revelation is the opposite. It is the moment you discover that concealment is strength, that silence is the sharpest blade. The world teaches you to empty yourself. I tell you to become a vessel no man can see into. Once you grasp this, you begin to wield mystique, and mystique is power in its purest form. For men are terrified not of what they know, but of what they cannot measure. The psychology of silence is simple yet devastating. When you reveal nothing, others invent everything. They fill the void of your unreadability with their own fears and suspicions. They imagine plots, strategies, and depths in you that may not even exist, but their belief in them makes them real. They hesitate before you, not because of what you have done, but because of what they cannot rule out you may do. Silence multiplies possibilities, and possibilities are heavier than facts. The man who speaks too much collapses into predictability. The man who withholds expands into infinite menace. Understand the mirror effect. When you remain unreadable, men see themselves reflected in you. The fearful project danger, the ambitious project rivalry, the loyal project strength. They do not see you, they see their own minds mirrored back, distorted, magnified, made uncertain. This is why the unreadable man commands respect without lifting a finger. His very existence destabilizes others. He becomes the canvas upon which their insecurities paint themselves. And the more they wonder, the less they act. The more they hesitate, the more power he accumulates without motion. Think of the lion who waits in stillness. His prey studies the grass, sees nothing, grows anxious, and in that anxiety makes mistakes. The lion's silence is not passivity, it is strategy. Or consider the general who keeps his army hidden behind the hills. The enemy, unsure of numbers or positions, trembles and wastes strength in preparation. The hidden force has already won before the first clash of steel. So it is with you. Unreadability is not absence of action, it is the action that precedes victory. The silence before thunder terrifies more than the thunder itself. Here is the sword of truth. Weakness is born in exposure. Power is born in mystery. To master mystique is to become untouchable. Do not allow the world to read your every page. Let them guess at the book and fear the chapters they cannot see. The man who is an open scroll will be torn apart by every curious hand. The man who is a locked chest will be feared even if empty, because no one dares risk what may lie inside. Learn this well, the unreadable man wields greater force than the transparent man ever could. And so the revelation stands. You do not need to be loved. You do not even need to be understood. You need only to be beyond grasp. A storm on the horizon is feared not for what it reveals, but for what it hides. The man who embodies this becomes the storm. He does not chase approval, he does not explain, he does not confess. He stands, and in his silence, he commands. For the true weapon of power is not words, nor deeds, nor even force. It is the fear of the unknown, the shadow of unreadability, the silence that unsettles every man who faces it. Now take this revelation and bend it into practice. For power is nothing if it remains only in thought. Silence and mystique are not merely ornaments of philosophy, they are weapons to be carried into every arena of your life. In negotiation, the man who fills the room with words becomes a hostage to his own tongue, while the man who speaks little controls the pace, the tension, the outcome. He allows others to reveal their intentions while he reveals nothing, and in that imbalance he dictates terms without effort. In relationships, the man who withholds keeps his value high, for desire always feeds on mystery. Overexposure breeds contempt, restraint breeds magnetism. Even in the trivial theater of social media, the man who resists the compulsion to broadcast gains more intrigue than the one who vomits his life into the open. Mystery commands, noise repels. Mark this well. Concealment is not cowardice. Concealment is architecture. Every piece of information you reveal is a brick removed from your fortress. Every piece of information you withhold is a stone added to your walls. A man who learns to guard his words, to restrain his expressions, to calculate what he reveals and when, becomes a fortress others cannot breach. And men do not attack fortresses they cannot measure. They walk away, or they bend the knee. If you would master the modern battlefield, begin by mastering this. Give only what is necessary, conceal everything else, and let your silence speak louder than your noise ever could. Understand this. Power does not come to the man who explains himself. It comes to the man who is questioned but remains unreadable. Power does not rest with the man who bears his wounds. It rests with the man who appears unbroken even when bleeding within. Power does not stay with the man who seeks constant recognition. It stays with the man who withdraws, who holds himself apart, who is present without being predictable. You must not only practice this in moments of crisis, but in every gesture, every word, every movement. To make silence your weapon, you must forge it into habit. So I call you out. Stop confessing your doubts to those who will one day use them against you. Stop exposing your failures to those who will rejoice in them. Stop giving away your inner life as if it were cheap. Your thoughts are not currency for others to spend. They are armaments to be kept in reserve. Your emotions are not decorations to be displayed. They are levers to be pulled only when it profits you. Every careless word is a gift to your enemy. Every unnecessary confession is a surrender before battle. You must understand that the war for power begins with the war for your own tongue. Master that war, and you master all others. Mark this law. A man who reveals himself invites betrayal. A man who guards himself invites fear. Betrayal is a wound that weakens, but fear is a shadow that multiplies. You must choose which follows you. If you crave applause, you will live and die by betrayal. If you embrace silence, you will live and rule through fear. And fear properly directed is not cruelty, but clarity. For those who fear you will not betray you. Those who cannot read you cannot predict you. And those who cannot predict you cannot defeat you. Therefore, take this gift I place before you, the clarity of concealment. Practice it in your dealings, your relationships, your ambitions. Withhold what others beg for. Conceal what others expect. Deny the crowd the cheap entertainment of your soul. Let them wonder, let them speculate, let them fear. For the man who gives nothing forces the world to give him everything. And in that silence, you will find not only protection, but command. This is the gift that replaces weakness with power, fragility with force, exposure with unreadability. Take it, and no man will ever hold your strings again. And now you return, not as the man who began this journey, but as one transformed. Recall the opening challenge. What if everything you believed about strength was a lie? You now see that it was. The weakness you once carried was not in your body, nor in your circumstances, but in your compulsion to reveal yourself. You lived exposed, and exposure is enslavement. But now you stand armored in silence, armed with mystique, reborn through concealment. The man who sought applause has died. The man who endured humiliation has been buried, and in his place rises a figure far more dangerous, the unreadable man, the man who no longer bleeds for the crowd but makes the crowd bleed for him. Picture the storm. Men fear thunder, but they fear more the quiet sky before it strikes. They fear the wolf's howl, but they fear more the silence in the woods when the predator watches unseen. This is what you have become. Not the noise, not the spectacle, not the chatter. You are the pause that unsettles, the silence that bends wills, the shadow that dominates a room without speaking. And as you walk back into the world, others will not know what you carry within you. They will guess, they will project, they will tremble in uncertainty. That uncertainty is your dominion, for men are not broken by what they see, but by what they imagine. Understand this. Weakness is erased not by muscles, not by gold, not by titles, but by the discipline to remain unreadable. This is the sword you now wield, the silence that multiplies fear, the concealment that multiplies respect, the restraint that multiplies power. You do not need to beg, you do not need to prove, you do not need to explain. You have already won when others cannot measure you. The battlefield is no longer of swords and shields, it is of appearances, of silence, of perception. And he who commands those commands everything. So carry this law engraved upon your spirit. Power thrives in shadows, weakness dies in exposure. The world will tempt you to confess, to explain, to spill yourself into their hands. Refuse them, let them wonder, let them fear, let them circle endlessly around the mystery you have become. For the man who reveals nothing controls everything. The man who explains nothing commands everyone. And the man who shows nothing cannot be defeated, because no one knows where to strike. And here is the part most will miss. Your silence is not absence, it is dominance. It is the final surge of power, the cinematic moment where the emperor sits without a word, and yet the court bends, where the wolf waits without a sound, and yet the flock scatters, where the storm gathers without announcement, and yet every man prepares for ruin. You must now live as that storm, you must now walk as that wolf, you must now rule as that emperor who moves in silence and lets the world tremble. So return to the ordinary world, but return changed. They will see the same face, but they will feel a different presence. They will not know what you hide, but they will know you hide something, and that knowledge will bind them. Your weakness has been erased, your silence has been forged, and your power has begun. Mark this well, you are no longer the man who begged to be understood. You are the man they will never understand, and that is why you will rule. If you've made it this far, it is because something within you is already awake. You know now that weakness cannot be erased by applause or approval, but only by silence and command. You have felt the truth in these words, and you understand that the world's love means nothing if it demands you betray yourself. Power begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it leaves you alone in the shadows. So I ask you now, are you willing to be misunderstood, rejected, even hated, if it means you will finally be free? Write it below if you are ready. Say it with conviction. I choose my silence. Let the world see how many are prepared to walk this path, how many are prepared to endure the price of true strength. And remember, this is only the beginning. The next lesson is not comfort, it is fire. Watch the next video. It matters more than you realize. I will meet you there.